Hari ki Jai. Jai Giriraj Govardhan ki Jai. Jai Shishi Radha Gopinath Ju ki Jai. Rishabhanu Nandini Rajeshwari ki Jai. Gopinath Bhavan ki Jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. Om Aginati Mirandasya Gyanam Jala Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Gurave Gaura Chandraya Radhikaya Taralaye Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tarabhaktaya Namo Namaha. Yam Pravajantam Anapetyam Apetya Krityam Dvaipaino Viraha Katara Ajuhava Putreti Tam Mayatayo Taravo Binedustam Sarvabhutam Munimanatoshmi Bhaktya Vihina Aparada Lakshay Shiptascha Karmadi Tarangamadye Kripa Maitvam Sharanam Prapana Prinde Namaste Charanara Vindam Bhajami Radham Aravinda Netram Smarami Radham Madhurashmitasyam Vadami Radham Karuna Baradram Tato Mamanasti Gatyana Chapi. I first of all offer millions and millions of Dandavat pranams unto the lotus feet of my most beloved Gurudev, Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Asto Tarazarashishi Madhula Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. And the same again, millions and millions of times unto the lotus feet of our beloved Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Asto Tarazarashishi Mad Srila Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. And all the Vaishnava and Vaishnavi devotees of the Lord, Dandavat pranams. So we've been progressing in the last 6 days through this third canto, and I've been trying to encourage a method of study so that we can capture it more simply, very simply, actually, the way Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has given this gift. Because he himself, in his commentary at the beginning of this canto, he divides it up into 6 very clear sections. So each day I've gone through the 6. Indira, do you want to have a shot at seeing if you can remember? Yesterday, Chandramukhi, she said beautifully, all 6, bang, bang, bang. I was very encouraged. Yes. 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 And the sub-creation. Yeah. 7 chapters there. That's a long one. That's like the picture, the heart of where we're going to go. Actually, this description of the creation is repeated constantly because it's such a dynamic pastime of Krishna. It's so wonderful to glorify Krishna in this way. And if the devotees are aware, Jai Shamji, if the devotees are aware of this phenomenal creation, then it's like our connection with Krishna from the very start of things is very clear and solid. If we're not familiar with that, how can we go to that Madhurya realm? So that's 2. And the third? Yes, so beautiful. He just drops that in, right in the middle of this third canto, this ecstatic pastime of Lord Varaha, saving the planet Earth from the waters of the Garbhodak ocean, so that Swayambhuva Manu can populate the earth. And at the same time, Krishna performs the pastime of killing Hiranyaksha. So that's very beautifully described. That's a very special pastime, that Varaha. So that's in the third canto. And then the next is a 1 chapter. Yes, that's called a summary. That's the summary of creation and the sub-creation again. So that's the 4th stage. And then the 5th? Yes. Yes, yes. You have it captured. Great. I'm really happy. I'm really happy, yes. That's what we discussed yesterday, and the day before, rather. And then the final? What we're discussing now. Kapila's instructions. Yes, yes. Very good, very good. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. So, it's not so tough, it's not so difficult, really, is it? I mean, it's quite logically... You can't hear? Hare Krishna. Okay. I'll turn the revs up a little bit. So, very simple. I'll just repeat it one more time, just to make it very embedded in our hard drives. That it opens with the beautiful dialogue between Maitreya, Uddhava, and Vidura, and we describe those personalities in detail. And then the creation and the sub-creation, Sarga and Visharga. And then Lord Varaha, and then a summary again in chapter 20 of the creation and sub-creation by Lord Brahma. And then the introduction to the Kadama Muni pastimes of with Devahuti and his father-in-law Swayambhuva Manu, and his ashram, the aerial mansion, etc. And now we've come to the heart, actually, of this third canto, which are Kapila Muni's instructions to his celebrated mother, Devahuti, who's celebrated as the most chaste personality. So, yesterday, I was going to, initially, flash through 4 chapters and just give the heart of it, and then today finish the last 5 chapters. But I can't move that fast. Even if I can sing fast, I can't move fast through this Bhagavatam. It's not possible. How can you... It would not be showing it sufficient respect, I think, to think that you can just speak these chapters in such a brief way. So yesterday we just sat on 1 chapter, the first chapter of his instructions. The glories of devotional service is what Prabhupada has called it. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur calls it Sankhya philosophy. So Prabhupada actually puts things in very nice perspective for the Western audience who aren't so educated in Sanskrit, etc., and these conceptions from birth. Actually, in this country, you can, almost speak to a beggar and he will understand the laws of karma. He will understand the laws of reincarnation. They understand that. They know that. They don't understand it that well, but it's in the ether. It's there. It's part of their nature. They understand. Do you speak English quite well? You're from Sicily also? He brought you with you? Very good. Well done, Prem. They're from Sicily, Yes. Long time he hasn't been here. It's very good. So, we don't have such familiarity with these concepts, so for us to go... So Prabhupada is turning everything to devotional service, devotional service, devotional service. Bhakti Devi, Bhakti Devi, Bhakti Devi. This is the current, the thread. This is why we are sitting hearing Bhagavatam, because we want that bhakti. We want that devotion to Krishna. We want that attraction to Krishna. Because the alternative to that, of course, is attraction to the material energy. We're already attracted through so many billions of births to this material energy. But now, this turnaround to strengthen this natural. It was saying yesterday, we read, how the jiva's natural proclivity is actually to love Krishna. It's his nature. It's the nature, but the nature's being covered. What is it being covered by? Now we're spreading it out. What is the covering? And it's very, very detailed. Just the immensity of its detail will sober the consciousness, which is required to actually bear the fruit, the reality of it, of the conclusion. It must be in a sober consciousness. The material energy is very exciting, going here and there, doing this and that, fulfilling our various fruitive activities, having all these different relationships, building, doing so many things, blah, 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 busy, busy, busy. And it gets sort of like bewildering. It takes us away from a sober place. So that sober place is supported just by the descriptions of Sankhya philosophy. This next chapter, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur calls Astanga Yoga, which is very tricky, but Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada calls it the fundamental principles of material nature. We must know this. It's the first teachings in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 13 and chapter 14. I think chapter 13 is called the nature, the enjoyer. And what else is it?
and consciousness. And the 14th chapter is the three modes of material nature. So these two chapters are in the Gyan Kand section of the Bhagavad Gita. You have the Karma Kand section at the beginning, the Gyan Kand at the end, and the very sensitive Bhakti Devi supported or sheltered by those two Kands on either side. In the middle is Bhakti Devi. So all of this is discussed in the very first elementary book that we ever read, which is Bhagavad Gita. So Prabhupada in his explanation refers many, many times to the Bhagavad Gita in reference to these descriptions. So it begins again with Sri Bhagavan Uvacha, that Krishna directly is speaking through the lotus mouth of Sri Kapila Dev to his Divine Mother. And he continues, he says, "My dear mother, now I shall describe unto you the different categories of the absolute truth." These are different categories that we're going to hear, knowing which any person can be released from the influence of the modes of material nature. These modes of material nature are inspired by Krishna directly. They're coming from him. Everything is emanating from him. When the devotee gets this really reinforced, then this is called the philosophy of Advaya, Gyan Paratattva. It's the foundation of our vision. It's the foundation of our consciousness to know that he is the substratum of everything in existence, that nothing is outside or separate from him. And then he goes on to speak, knowledge is the ultimate perfection of self-realization. Without knowledge, what is it then? It's avidya, it's ignorance. Avidya is an aspect of Maya. Maya is a Shakti. Avidya is not a Shakti. Avidya is emanating from the Shakti. It's described there are two aspects to Maya. There is avidya, the ignorance of the jiva, and then there is pradhan, which is the unconglomerate material elements, etc., in their unconglomerate state, that pradhan. And until it's impregnated, it has no cohesiveness. It can't act or function. So these are two aspects of Maya. Also, two aspects of Maya is vidya and avidya. These again are aspects of Maya. Maya Devi is not an eternal truth. It is a reality, but it's not eternal. It's temporary. It's the shadow of Yogamaya, this Mahamaya that we're talking about. So actually Chandramukhi's not here today, she's doing a study on Dasmula, but in the Dasmula section, in the chapter 14 is Shakti Tattva, and 15, 16 and 17 is Jiva Tattva. And this describes in another type of language exactly the same precepts here. So if we're familiar with those chapters, it's the same Tattva that's being repeated. I shall explain that knowledge unto you by which the knots of attachment to the material world are cut. And he begins by glorifying Sri Bhagavan. The personality of Godhead is the Supreme Soul and has no beginning, Anadir. This verse begins, Anardi Atma Purusho. This is in the 3rd chapter. This is knowledge that we want to appreciate are on the pages of the Bhagavatam. We want to develop our relationship with the Bhagavatam. So this is taking us into who is the Bhagavatam. This is the Bhagavatam that is speaking. The Supreme Lord is the Supreme Soul, and he has no beginning. This is Anardi. He is transcendental to the material modes of nature and beyond existence of this material world. We have to have that fully understood. That means not like us, because our defect is that we see things from our own perspective. We can't appreciate something outside of our sense of vision. Krishna is totally outside and beyond that, so he's worshipable. So we take shelter of that supreme, authoritative personality. Beyond the existence of this material world, he is perceivable everywhere because he is self-effulgent, and by his self-effulgent luster, the entire creation is maintained. This is called Brahma. Generally through the literatures other than what have been written by Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, they always talk about Brahm. Prabhupada calls it the Brahman. He makes it more specific. He makes this distinction between the Brahman and that what do you say? Well, Lord Brahma for a start, because sometimes devotees are thinking that it's Lord Brahma when it says Brahm. But it's the conglomerate of everything is Brahm. Everything is Brahm, he's saying. But specifically, Brahman is the effulgence of Krishna. So Prabhupada makes that distinction. Now he's saying, as his pastime, that Supreme Lord, the greatest of the great, accepted the subtle material energy which is invested with three modes of material nature and which is related with Vishnu. So these three modes are acting upon us, on the jiva. When we start to appreciate these modes in life, then we can start to understand. Now I'm being influenced by this mode. Now I'm being influenced by this mode. Most of the time, because we have material desires, because we have fruitive desires to be fulfilled, it's in the mode of passion. And then it's mixed with ignorance. And sometimes we come up to a sattva vision. But most of the time it's in the mode of passion, which is the creating mood, which is that is the description of that mode. Like Lord Brahma is the Ishtadev of that creation, of this sub-creation. So divided into varieties of her threefold modes, material nature creates the forms of the living entities, and the living entities, seeing this, are illusioned by the knowledge-covering feature of the illusory energy. So this is the potency of this Shakti, Maya Devi. It's very helpful to understand this. Like if you're sick, what's the first thing you do in India if you're sick? You go and take a blood test, right? You want to know what is the, what sickness do you have? Do you have malaria, typhoid, jaundice, whatever it is? You need to go and get it analyzed. So we need to analyze what is our sickness here. We're being covered by these three modes of material nature, and what is the distinctions between those three modes of nature, and how is it affecting, how is it covering me? This is what Sankhya philosophy is about. Because of his forgetfulness, the transcendental living entity accepts the influence of the material energy as his field of activities. This is all the material energy, and we're working with it like a farmer or a gardener in a field. But it's all produced by these modes of material energy. We want to see this clearly. And thus actuated, he wrongly applies the activities to himself. So when he's interacting with those material modes of nature, he's covered by the illusion that actually he is the doer of the various activities. The activities themselves ultimately are being carried out by Krishna. Ultimately, he is the supreme doer. Or the material modes of nature themselves are forcing us into different situations. I'll read on. Material consciousness is the cause of one's conditioned life, in which conditions are enforced upon the living entity by the material energy. Although the spirit soul does not do anything and is transcendental to such activities, he is thus affected by conditioned life. The spirit soul himself is actually far away from this material energy. He's pure spirit, but he's covered by this degree. The covering is reinforced when I have faith in that material energy, when I actually am thinking that yes, this is the fundamental reality, when I'm thinking that this is the summum bonum, but when I'm understanding this is all very, very temporary, including my body, my consciousness of this controlling mood is also temporary. So we're working our way through this thick covering. The cause of the conditioned soul's material body and the senses presiding deities, the demigods, is the material nature. This is understood by learned men. The feelings of happiness and distress of the soul, who is transcendental by nature, are caused by the spirit soul himself. going to read some of this commentary here by Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. In Bhagavad Gita, it is said that when the Lord descends in this material world, he comes as a person by his own energy at Mamaya. He is not forced by any superior energy. He comes by his own will, and this can be called his pastime or lila. But here it is clearly stated that the conditioned soul is forced to take a certain type of body and senses under the three modes of material nature. That body is not received according to his own choice. In other words, a conditioned soul has no free choice. We have independence to choose Krishna or the material energy. At the very beginning of our sojourn here in this material consciousness, we choose between the two. There's an influence of Krishna on one side, and there's the glittering sparkle of the material attraction on the other. And we have all chosen that material attraction is described in Jivadhamma, because we don't have what is called a Bal Shakti, or this potency to be able to discriminate. We haven't absorbed any knowledge. We're in ignorance. So in that ignorant condition, I have chosen that. He has to accept a certain type of body according to his karma. So karma is also not eternal. Krishna is eternal. The time is eternal, that aspect. But karma is not eternal. Karma will conclude when one breaks out of this samsara, when one again understands his divine nature. Jivara Suruphoy Krishnara Nityadas, when he understands this deeply. And obviously it's not an intellectual understanding, he's practicing it, he's realized it. But when there are bodily reactions as felt in happiness and distress, it is to be understood that the cause is the spirit soul himself. If he so desires, the spirit soul can change this conditioned life of dualities by choosing to serve Krishna. So we should give acknowledgement to the soul's potency within us and not just be led around by the external senses. It's the senses that are engaging us with the sense objects that is causing the illusion. When I meditate or when I chant, when I sit quietly and separately and appreciate who I am, in fact, what is my identity, then I can completely separate myself from this material illusion. I still have to interact, but I'm giving space for my soul to interact with this world, to let that potency manifest. The living entity is the cause of his own suffering, but he can also be the cause of his eternal happiness. It's like I've often said the example that we're holding on to Maya and we're shouting out, let go, let go. Right? We know that I'm in Maya because I'm not happy. Gurudev said you're not really a devotee at all unless you're happy. Because happiness is actually the mode of goodness. So if you're not actually happy, then you're not in the mode of goodness. So if it's just passion and ignorance, this is not a full devotee. This is a Mishra Bhakta, that he's conditioned by these different modes. So we should be like a doctor and test our pulse and see, where am I at now? In 2 hours' time, where will I be at? In 3 hours' time, where will I be? It's constant, because it's constantly in flux. It's changing. You know, it's dynamic, so it's expanding. But it's also going through so many changes of awareness. When he wants to engage in Krishna consciousness, a suitable body is offered to him by the internal potency, the spiritual energy of the Lord. And when he wants to satisfy his senses, a material body is offered. Thus, it is his free choice to accept a spiritual body or a material body. We can turn these words of body into consciousness. When I'm in spiritual consciousness, I'm seeing everything as connected to service to my Guru. Because we can't see Krishna immediately. What we can see, Guru. Guru is so compassionate that he manifests in front of us. He gives us his moods, he gives us his instructions. And we know, somebody was asking me the other day, how can we tell when we're pleasing Krishna? You can tell when you're pleasing Krishna when you know that Srila Gurudev is happy. We've spent time with Guru. We know what are Gurudev's moods to some degree. We've studied what his teachings and writings are. We know by associating with others who also are with Guru, we know what is pleasing to him and what is not pleasing to him. And it's really remarkable because actually many times you might think, oh, this is very pleasing to Gurudev, but actually Gurudev's not so impressed. I can remember I made that world universal map, with the thing, and I took it very proudly to show Gurudev, oh, what's that, very unimpressed. And then another time I was in one drama in Badger, and he was so impressed. He kept saying again and again and again, oh, you were so good in the drama. I think, wow, what pleases you? It's not what we directly think. It's when actually our heart and soul engages, which is somewhere where we're not probably usually familiar with being. We're probably more entangled in this material world, juggling about all various sort of like aspects of what am I going to get. If I'm nice to Indupati, what will he give me in return? If he's nice to me, what am I going to give to him? Or, this judgment and this fruitive mentality goes so deep in our hearts. Doesn't it? Am I speaking correctly? I think it's even Gurudev, he talks about this. He said, even in family relationships between brother and sister, mother and father, there is still some fruitive desire there. What do I want from this person, from that person? Do I want them to flatter my false ego today? Oh yes, that will make me feel very good. Then I'll go through another few hours of illusion and bewilderment that I am actually, someone materially important. So all this has to be very much purified. And these explanations, it's very lengthy. I'm going very slowly through, but actually this chapter has 72 verses. It's huge. It's one of the biggest chapters in this Kapila instruction. And it is so detailed. It just becomes more detailed. What I'm trying to do is share with us and give us a picture of what is in the Bhagavatam to inspire us to read the Bhagavatam regularly. If we want more knowledge on our conditioned situation, then we must take the Bhagavatam to see what is that, what is the reading, what is my pulse by checking these pages. So now, after this quite brief introduction, then Devahuti, in verse 9, she starts to ask some questions to show her comprehension of the subject matter up to date. Questions are very important when we study Jivadharma. Many times Vijay Kumar and Brajanath are repeating back verbatim what they've heard from Babaji. So the teacher, it's very encouraging that yes, the student has understood this much, so I can go further and explain more and more. But if the student is not asking any questions, then just like Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he didn't know what Mahaprabhu was thinking when for 7 days he recited the that impersonal Vedic teachings to him. When he recited that in Puri, and Mahaprabhu was completely silent. And then finally at the end he said, well, what have you understood? What have you heard? Then Mahaprabhu said, oh, I have just understood that you've covered over, actually, that Supreme Personality. Anyway, that was a whole other topic. So Devahuti is saying, O Supreme Lord, kindly explain the characteristics of the Supreme Person and his energies, for both of these are the causes of this manifest and unmanifest creation. So now she wants to know more explicitly. So by the clarity of her question, Kapila is understanding how much she understands. The personality of Godhead said, the unmanifested, eternal combination of the three modes is the cause of the manifest state and is called pradhan. And it is called prakriti when in the manifest stage of existence. So prior to the three modes of material nature mixing, it's pradhan. And this is an aspect of Maya Devi, Maya Shakti, as I've already described. Those two aspects of Maya, avidya and pradhan. And when this becomes manifested, then it is called prakriti, which is the material energy, in its manifested state. Pradhan is in its dormant state, or before its impregnated state. That's the pradhan. Now it's talking here about the aggregate elements, namely the 5 gross elements, and the 5 subtle elements, and the 4 internal senses, and the 5 senses for gathering knowledge, and the 5 outward organs of action are known as the pradhan. And this again is the analysis, like a doctor, of our situation here. And it's describing now, in the next verses, what are the 5 gross elements. That's earth, water, fire, air, and ether. We understand those as elements can't be broken down. They're completely like it's an element. And then it's describing the senses. So we have 10 senses, and then there are the sense objects. So the senses for acquiring knowledge and the organs for action, number 10. They are the auditory sense, the sense of taste, the tongue, the tactile sense of touch, the sense of sight, the sense of smell, the active organ for speaking, the active organs for working, and those for traveling, generating, and evacuating. So we have these 10 senses. We have these 5, sight, ears, nose, tongue, touch, and then we have walking, hands, speech, evacuating, and the genital. These are 5 working senses. So that makes 10 senses. At some point we have to apply ourselves to appreciate this. The internal subtle senses, what is subtle? Something that we can't see. Mind, intelligence, and false ego. These are the subtle senses. Are experienced as having 4 aspects in the shape of mind, intelligence, ego, and contaminated consciousness. So both the sense of my identity in this material world and contaminated consciousness. Distinctions between them can be made only by different functions, since they represent different characteristics. All these are considered the qualified Brahman. It's all considered Krishna. The mixing element, which is known as time, is counted as the 25th element. So without the ingredient of time, nothing really manifests. How conditioned by time are we? Just think about it. Utterly. We're thinking of the future and the past. How often are we actually in the powerful present itself? How often are we able to act in that place? When we're very satisfied or happy in our particular situation, then perhaps we move into that powerful present for a moment. But then again, we're calculating and making plans to enjoy something at a future date. Or we're intimidated about all impending death for all of us. It's like we have these 2 clashes of like waves crashing together. On one side we have so many ambitions, and on the other side we know we have limited time to fulfill them. So it's crashing like this. These ambitions we want to fulfill, and this knowledge of limited time in which to fulfill them. So this is creating friction. And that friction creates a fire, and that is called Davanala. That is called the fire of material existence. Everyone is running, trying to fulfill these desires, and they don't think they have enough time left to fulfill these desires. So this is the conditioned consciousness. When we appreciate what is the conditioned consciousness, what is my sickness, what is the blood diagnosis, then I can start to apply the cure, right? Without clear appreciation of the situation. So here on these pages, and we should spend at least 1 week studying one of these chapters. Instead, I'm trying to just speak the essence of this chapter just in 1 hour. But really, the details are overwhelming. There are so many details. I'm just trying to pick up the thread and the essence. The influence of the Supreme Lord is felt in the time factor, which causes fear of death due to the false ego of the deluded soul who has contracted material nature. This fear of death, Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada says in another place that, how does he say it? He says, death is just a material symptom. It's not a reality for the soul. It's just a material symptom of... Death is a symptom of material consciousness. That's exactly how he words it. Death is a symptom of material consciousness. But why are we so intimidated by that? Why is that pushing us to do, so many things perhaps we wouldn't do normally? Why is this time that Kasturi Didi was describing as being crunched, that is speeded up by this apparent fear of death? Why should the realized soul be fearful of another change of body? Why are we? Then the fearfulness comes from our attachments that we have accumulated during this very brief birth. Bhaktivinoda Thakur gives a beautiful example in Jaiva Dharma of this, of 2 men on a journey, and they stop in a hotel just for 1 night, and they go out the back and they start planting trees. They start planting all kinds of flowers and everything, and they're leaving the next day. So why are they doing it? Why are they taking so much trouble to have this endeavor, this fruitive activity? What is the value of fruitive activity beyond this material world? It's interesting to think about it. It has no value. Whatever we achieve has no value. The only thing that has value is how much of attraction am I unto Radha and Krishna. When I'm dancing in the spiritual world, the only consideration is my affection and attraction to Krishna. That's all. This is the sum and substance. This is the conclusion. But we have to break through, like an onion. It has so many layers on it. So Kapila Muni, in his extraordinary compassion, is analyzing all of these different layers for our meditation and contemplation, so that we can see, oh yes, that's the enemy, take it away. Oh yes, I don't want that, take it away. Yes, I don't need that, take it away. And gradually this uncovering will manifest for the jiva. By exhibiting his potencies, the Supreme Lord adjusts all these different elements, keeping himself within as the Supersoul and without as time. Krishna is time. He creates time for us to become disturbed by, that we don't have enough time. What am I going to do when I finish the class? What am I going to do this morning? What am I going to do this afternoon? What am I going to do this evening? We have all these agendas, ticking, clocking, speeding along. But when can that actually be sobered? Through our practice of chanting, through this practice of chanting. This chapter actually concludes with the practice of chanting. With the practice of chanting, this is how Bhaktivedanta Swami reconciles everything. He says with this discharge of devotional service through the chanting of Hare Krishna, this activity itself will sober the consciousness to take stock of his situation. After the Supreme Lord impregnates material nature with his internal potency, material nature delivers the sum total of the cosmic intelligence, known as the Hiranya Maya. This is like the prototype, this is like the first aspect of Maya. This takes place in material nature when she is agitated by the destinations of the conditioned souls. She becomes agitated by our fruitive desires. What do we want? The nature of the mind is to say, I want, 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 I want. Isn't it? Every second. I want this, I want that, I want this, I want that, I want this. The nature of the soul is to want nothing. That's the difference between material consciousness and spiritual realization. And imagine you don't want anything. Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma na sochati na kanchati. No more hankering, no more lamentation. Because you don't want anything. If you don't want anything, you're completely like Shanti. Except to run after the gopis and serve them. This we want. This we want so much. But how much of our energies are we able to put in that direction? And how much gets distracted by these, temporary, important jobs that I have to do in the world? How to mix them together. How to dovetail. Prabhupada uses this word all the time, dovetail. How to dovetail these ambitions, these natural fruitive activities, into our progressive devotional practices. How to dovetail. As we get older, we seem to it falls into place more, what I should do with my time and my life. And things become more and more clear about, what is a waste of time and what is not a waste of time. What are the priorities? We get that much more clarity on it. Thus, after manifesting variegatedness, the effulgent Mahatattva, which contains all the universes within itself, which is the root of all cosmic manifestations, and which is not destroyed at the time of annihilation, swallows the darkness that covered the effulgence at the time of dissolution. I'm going to read this commentary here. Since the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Prabhupada uses this word very deliberately, constantly, throughout, the Supreme Personality. Why? Because we're coming from a very impersonal place, all of us. We're coming from the Tatashta. We're coming from that place in the body of Mahavishnu, where we were all impersonally stuck. It's a spiritual place, but it's impersonal. And then we went to sleep during the pralaya. That is also another impersonal state. So this reinforcement of the personality is constantly manifesting. Is ever existing, all blissful and full of knowledge. His different energies are also ever existing in the dormant stage. Thus, when the Mahatattva was created, it manifested the material ego and swallowed up the darkness which covered the cosmic manifestation at the time of dissolution. This idea can be further explained. A person at night remains inactive, covered by the darkness of night. But when he is awakened in the morning, the covering of night or the forgetfulness of the sleeping state disappears. Similarly, when the Mahatattva appears after the night of dissolution, the effulgence is manifested to exhibit the variegatedness of this material world. Very beautiful analogy. Prabhupada used to say these were his ecstasies when he was making these commentaries. Actually, I'll just share with you one understanding that I've experienced by reading for the last 13, 14 months, just the commentaries of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. When I come back to read Prabhupada's, there is so much more mood actually in these purports. There is so much more bhav, because it's Prabhupada's words directly. If you study those commentaries of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, they are fascinating, and they give us a whole inside picture of knowledge. But the mood, the bhav, is going through a translator. It's not directly his heart, because there's an obstruction there. But these words here, and you can feel the relish that Prabhupada is experiencing in these pastimes of great happiness and joy at reading these instructions from Kapila Dev. It's almost like infectious when you read these commentaries of Prabhupada. His ecstasies really are here. in every single purport, even though the commentaries of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur are very wonderful. But I just thought I'd share that. That was my own personal experience between these two commentaries. These are almost like Prabhupada is embracing us, saying, quickly, come, I will, nourish you. But the other commentaries are not with the same Karuna Shakti, that powerful compassion. I'll go through quickly here. It's talking about the false ego. This false ego is characterized as the doer. This is the false conception that I am the doer. I have done that. As an instrument and as an effect. It is further characterized by serene, active, or dull, according to how it is influenced by the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. So the false ego, even if the false ego is in the mode of goodness, it's still controlled by the modes of goodness. But the mode of goodness is the place where we can springboard to have a clear spiritual consciousness. If it's just the mode of passion, if it's just performing activities, then it doesn't have the same potency. It's not as settled as much as the mode of goodness can be, this sattva gun. From the false ego of goodness, another transformation takes place. From this evolves the mind, whose thoughts and reflections give rise to desire. It's very interesting. From the false ego, thinking that I am the body, in the mode of goodness, it transforms within the mind in thoughts and reflections to what do I want now? Like Narad Rishi. Actually, when he left his mother and left her behind after he'd been having the mercy of the Bhaktivedantas, then he travels through many places. Then he hears the sound of Krishna. Krishna speaks to him directly. He has a vision of Krishna. And then he disappears and Krishna says, I won't present myself again in this birth because you still have something in the mode of goodness to purify. You still have that desire to live in a beautiful forest in the mode of goodness. You still have that desire. Even that has to be purified. That is not spiritual. Anything in this world is not of spiritual value ultimately. It can support our spiritual practices, but that by itself doesn't constitute spirituality, just living in a beautiful forest, very peacefully and everything. You go straight back to Satya Yuga. Who were the Ishtadevs of Satya Yuga? Who were the incarnations of Satya Yuga? It's described as Vaikuntanath is one of the avatars in Satya Yuga. Yogeshwara is another. All these very Aishwarya type of personalities manifested in the age of Satya. So we, by some divine blessing, have received the touch of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's message, which is the only message describing what is the Parakya Bhav in Braj. And he's reconciling everything through the teachings of Mahaprabhu. Through the teachings of Mahaprabhu, that I'm understanding that this Aishwarya mood is not attractive, that meditating on the Supersoul is not attractive, that these types of meditation is not my path. So in order to progress, we have to very much know what is our aim and object. What is the sadhya? Kriti sadhya bhavet sadhya bhav sasadan abhida. We must know, Rupa Goswami has said, what is our aim and object? And by reading this analytical presentation of our conditioned situation, then it gives us information of how to clear it. Once the sickness has been revealed, now I can actually clear it to some degree. So we need to regularly read these pages of the Bhagavatam to assess our condition. The mind of the living entity is known by the name of Lord Aniruddha. the supreme ruler of the senses. He possesses a bluish-black form, resembling a lotus flower growing in the autumn. He is found slowly by the yogis. The yogis are looking for that personality. By transformation of the false ego in passion, intelligence takes birth. Intelligence of how to fulfill my material desires. This is how we often utilize our intelligence. How can I best become happy? Oh, if I have this, if I have that, if I have this, if I have that. But if we utilize that intelligence, the same intelligence, in trying to appreciate my situation in this conditioned world, that is the real use of intelligence. Intelligence takes birth, O virtuous lady. The functions of intelligence are to help in ascertaining the nature of objects when they come into view, and to help the senses. I'll read this commentary. Intelligence is the discriminating power to understand an object, and it helps the senses make choices. Therefore, intelligence is supposed to be the master of the senses. The perfection of intelligence is attained when one becomes fixed in the activities of Krishna consciousness. By the proper use of intelligence, one's consciousness is expanded, and the ultimate expansion of consciousness is Krishna consciousness. Doubt, misapprehension, correct apprehension, memory, and sleep, as determined by their different functions, are said to be the distinct characteristics of intelligence. It's saying here that doubt is one of the important functions of intelligence. Blind acceptance of something does not give evidence of intelligence. We use our critical natures to assess the validity of an object. We all criticize. But if we use that critical nature to assess the spiritual value in any circumstance or any situation, what does that mean? That means, how can I perform some devotional service? How can I do something pleasing for my guru? This is where our intelligence should be fully utilized. What is most pleasing to guru? We have to stay right on the edge of this razor. We have to stay right on the cutting edge, so to speak, of this fixing our aim and object. We've said many times there's sadhan bhakti, bhav bhakti, and prema bhakti. If our sadhan is not focused on bhav, then our sadhan is useless. And Jiva Goswami gives that beautiful analogy of the fire yajna. I've said many times. You know, you're making all these preparations for a yajna, but you don't actually light the fire. You chant all the mantras, you have the gates guarding the directions, you have the coconuts and the mango leaves, etc. So much preparation, but you're not lighting. The lighting the fire is like bhav. The preparation is like sadhan. So I'm performing this sadhan to access bhav. So what is bhav? So this I must be very clear on. This is described very clearly in the 22nd chapter of Jivadharma. These 9 symptoms, Shantya, Avyakta, Kalatvam, this tolerance, Shantya, Avyakta, Kalatvam, not wasting a moment. What's the next one? Shantya, Avyakta, Kalatvam. Viraktya, Manasunyate, this detachment from material energy. Manasunyate, humility. Manasunyate. Is that right? Humility, I think. Ashabandha Samutkanta, great eagerness. Great hope, Ashabandha, great hope. That's a very joyful meditation, to have great hope in my spiritual consummation, my spiritual conclusion. Ashabandha Samutkanta, great eagerness. We can't move forward with eagerness. Eagerness is the potency pushing us. And then Nama Gana Sadaruchi, but great affection for the names of Sri Krishna. Ashaktis Tat Gunakyane, great attachments to Krishna's form and pastimes. Ashaktis tad gunakyane, guna, Krishna's pastimes. And then, what's the last one? Ashaktis tad gunakyane, pritistad vishatestale. Great love and joy for Krishna's pastime places. I'm so happy to go to Nandagan. I'm so happy to go to Varshana. I'm so happy to go to Nidhuvan. I'm so happy to go to Radha Damodar, to see Jamuna Devi every day. All these are giving me great joy. These are symptoms, 9 symptoms of what is bhav. So that is our object by our sadhana, to actually pray for those symptoms to become quickly manifest in my heart and vision. This is the purpose of our sadhana, to focus on what is bhav bhakti. And then, from bhav bhakti, prema bhakti. Gurudev has told us that we cannot endure the stage of prem in these bodies. They would explode. So our aim and object in this birth is to reach this platform of bhav bhakti. And bhav bhakti creates all satisfaction and joy for the jiva. And with that, those gifts, then we can take this knowledge into the world also. We have to do some sort of activity. You can't just become like a stone. Somehow or other, we're dovetailing these fruitive propensities to going out and making devotees, going out and distributing books, doing things like that, doing activities of that sort. That's dovetailing our fruitive desires. Otherwise, we can sit and just chant, very carefully and try to understand these deeper precepts within us. So look, my friends, I've only come to the verse 31. So I've left you a lot of homework. There's 33 chapters here. One of the chapters is entitled The Movements of the Living Entities, which is fascinating, about the growth of in the embryo of the seed from the child, how it grows and so on. This is very powerful description. Fantastic. Great. Great. Wouldn't it be wonderful if all these chapters were illustrated like that? If someone takes the time and the trouble to actually, reveal these. My deepest desire, probably will never happen, but is to make a movie of the whole Srimad Bhagavatam. Anyway, we'll see. But these are the instructions of Kapila Dev to his mother. And I've touched only a very little bit, and I've just tried to read some of the translations so we can hear what is the fund of this knowledge directly from this scripture itself, to give us an appreciation of the Bhagavatam. These classes were only designed for that end, to give us a deeper appreciation of the Bhagavatam, to encourage and aspire us into touching it daily. If we don't take a daily medicine, like we very carefully take our diets and our other things, so carefully we pay attention to that, but are we as careful with this diet? This is the diet, if we're not getting this diet, everything else is out of sync. Your body may be getting stronger, or that will be an illusion also, because it can't ultimately, increase in strength. It's going to deteriorate. Most of the people sitting here are over 50-ish. You're a young man. So maybe yours will climax at 50. But nevertheless, it's going to go down, You can't stop it. Do you know anyone who's lived forever? It doesn't exist, We're all going down that route. So why should... Vyasadeva, yes, Shakti Vaishya Avatar. He's still in the Himalayas somewhere. But there was a time when he was born. So there will be a time when he'll leave this world also. So, but know that. See how much attention we pay to our 3 meals a day or 2 meals a day, and this and that. So many important things we have in our lives to do. But this is the real thing. If you can realize at a younger age that this is the only thing that I should do with my life, then you have made the greatest decision and greatest success of your life. No doubt. And Krishna, when we make these kind of decisions, He comes with all his devas and supports all our various activities. Very quick, we get success in any sort of material endeavor. Just in a flash, bang, bang, bang. Because he's supporting us. Devotees have experienced this. When they know that they're on the correct trail, then somehow all auspiciousness, all the winds of auspiciousness, this means all the devas will come and support materially our journey. Make it very simple for us, There will always be funds for our chapatis or whatever. Or if not, then that will also be an impetus to actually take shelter of Krishna. If you're given some material opulence or all the material opulence is taken away, in both situations, it can be a great impetus. If you get some material resources and you're utilizing it totally in the service of Krishna, then this is great fortune. And if you don't have any resources and you have to pray to Krishna, oh, where will I get my next meal from? I don't worry. I'm just like Srivas. He would clap 3 times. Remember? When Mahaprabhu would ask. And if Lakshmi Dev didn't appear with some, situation for his sustenance, then he would just jump in the Ganga and leave his body. So she always came running. Oh, quick, he's clapped. Here, take this, take this. Why not? They're there. We're actually discussing them. They're all here. They want our success. So those winds of auspiciousness will blow strongly if we're practicing this path. Mahaprasad. Yes. So Mahaprasad is running to sustain our bodies. Yes. But we see, I'm sure all of us, I can think of, every day 4 or 5 miracles happen to show me, to reconfirm, the potency of Krishna supporting what I'm doing. It gives us great confidence. Devotees need confidence in their path because it's an unknown journey. We've never been here before. It's not like in another lifetime I went through as close as this. This is the highest birth we've ever had. We may have been a great yogi or whatever in previous birth, but here we're sitting at the lotus feet of Radha Gopinath in Imlital, in Sevakunj, under the guidance of a pure Rasik Vaishnava. What higher place could there be than this in the time of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? So count our blessings, count our fortunes, and utilize them, capitalize them. It's like a man is very stupid if he has some money but doesn't invest it. So it makes more money by itself. He just sits there, it goes rotten, starts to sprout, and goes old and just, moldy. But if you utilize these things, like it's saying in the Bible, that, what was that? There's a story of that also. One man had 1 shekel or something, 1 gold coin, and he just hid it, Another man went and, I can't remember the story, I don't read the Bible so often. Okay, so I've given some thoughts, I hope, and some idea of the nature of these 2 volumes. This is 1 volume, it's hefty. And there's another volume, the same, part 1 and part 2 of the 3rd canto. So I hope you've got some picture.
Radhakanta Prabhu to maintain his company. The company entails so much in the material field, then how do you explain that?
I believe that at different times, like I know other people who have been told to build temples, etc., because Gurudev has appreciated the amount of passion that individual has within his nature, and the ability he has to perform a function of this, to encourage and help other people. But when that passion expires, then automatically that individual will start reading and chanting and spending more time in Braj, automatically, and Krishna will bring a substitute to complete whatever project, because the principle is always the development of our attraction to Krishna. And if that is distracted by bricks and mortar, if someone is being distracted by that, that's not going to be as pleasing. But it may be a purifying process, the bricks and mortar, in a first early stage. And then later on, if you're spending your whole life until you die with bricks and mortar, I think that's rather unfortunate. You know, I know many devotees, older devotees, they've never cultivated their chanting seriously. They've never cultivated their study seriously. So they get to the age of 65, 70, and they don't really have the heart of it there. They don't really know, philosophically even, why they're doing what they're doing. Because sometimes with old age, you can get a little bit, you know, what do you call it? Senile. It can happen, yes. Definitely. Not for me, but it can happen. I think if we practice learning shlokas and reading, you don't have that problem with old age. Your mind stays sharp if you're always learning verses and so on. But if you stop that, especially with the materialist, if he's being entertained through the medium of television or something, that physically puts your mind to sleep. Because you're not active, you're just you're just like getting all this stuff. And it just makes you so lazy that the mind just reaches such a low sort of senile level. But for devotees, their minds get sharper. Did we ever see Gurudev at the end of his life? Was he, you know, I know with Srila Vamana Maharaj, he shut down completely. But it's not that he was remotely senile or anything like that. They sometimes exhibit a pastime like that. Jai Ho. Srila Gurudev Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavatam. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I just wanted to...
That's what...
To elaborate it, because already I know that, but it was not clear from your reading.
I read so little. I read only like a less than half of that one chapter and just opened a little bit.
Because most of the people are in the world, so then it's good to
Yes.
explain that.
I think the analogy,
I feel bad
yeah,
that what happens in my life, but actually all is perfect at all moments,
yes.
like a stone.
It is ultimately. It's encouraging, it's good. Jai. Srila Gurudev Ki Jai. BV Tridandi Ki Jai. Thank you so much for your attention during these few days. Thank you. Without having a listener, how can there be a speaker? I explained at the beginning, when I get the opportunity to speak on these topics, it fills me with so much enthusiasm personally to deepen my awareness of these topics. Like these last topics of Kapila were very intimidating for me, because actually they always seem to be very complex, and I'm lazy, and I avoid complexities if I can. But here I've been forced to actually study it, and it's so ecstatic. It's so beautiful. These verses are so sweet. Like, what do they say? Once begun, half done. So if you just approach these topics, if you just start to read these topics, and then just see how they can open up and blossom in the consciousness and appreciate the beauty of Prabhupada's purports. He is overjoyed to speak on these topics. You can almost feel his excitement with them. It's very beautiful. It's so rich. There's nothing in existence to compare to this. How can we neglect? So this is what I've tried to encourage. Srila Gurudev Ki Jai, Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Anantakota Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Gaur Premanande, Hari Hari Bol. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, O Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, O Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. O Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Oh, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Oh, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Gaura Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Jaya Giri Raja Jaya Govardhana, Giri Raja Jaya Govardhana. O Jaya Sachinandan Jaya Gaura Hari, Sachinandan Jaya Gaura Hari. O Jaya Radha Gopinata Radha Gopinata Radhe. Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Shri Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Shri Radhe, Jaya Vrishabhanu Nandini Radhe Radhe, Vrishabhanu Nandini Radhe Radhe. O Radhe, 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 Radhe. Shil Gurudev ki jai, Rupanuga Guru Varigya ki jai, Sri Sachinandana Gaura Hari ki jai, Shri Radha Gopinath Ju ki jai, Ananta Kota Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Gaur Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha, Kripa Sindhavevacha, Patitanam Pavanibhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha.